We're doing 6. We're finishing 6 up today, but we're going to be starting at 6A. So go ahead and turn to 6A. Yes, so we have to talk about the bony fish. Fishes. Let's talk about grammar for a second. If you have a fish tank with a lot of fish in it, like say 20 fish in it, we call the plural of fish fish. All right, but if you're talking about all the fishes in the world, the plural is fishes. Okay, no, all the fishes in the world. I know it's weird, but that apparently is the grammar. You can maybe ask the English teacher about it. Okay, I don't know. I just do what they tell me to do. So, all right, so we're going to be looking at the bony fish. Why are the sharks not in this group?
Because they don't have any bone.
Correct, they have cartilage, right? Our dissection today will be the shark. Okay, so we have one shark. I'm going to open it up for you pretty much, and y'all are going to come over and investigate it and answer a ton of questions. It looks like in your book. All right, so let's look at a few things about bony fish that you need to know. Okay, so next week you'll have a quiz over Module 6. Yes, when you come in, and we're going to cover all of Module 7 next week, the whole thing. And then I will send a take-home quiz with you on Module 7 next week. The next week you'll come back with that quiz that you can use your notes for, and you'll have a midterm exam. Okay? That's how close we are to Christmas break. 3 weeks. All right? Okay. Some examples of bony fish. You know, perch, bass, carp, goldfish, the little betta that you put in your, fish bowl. So if you've gone fishing, the bony fish are going to be what you're catching. Catfish would fit in this. All right, so the rest of the fish, if you will. They usually have something known as a swim bladder. Do y'all remember in Biology 1 that you dissected a fish? You should have dissected a fish in Biology 1. Sometimes I have for my students the little perch that we dissect. Sometimes I bring a fresh fish from Fiesta. Fresh fish from Fiesta. All right, and you can see that swim bladder. The swim bladder is going to give them buoyancy. It's going to allow them to float a little better. Can you think of a famous fish that does not have a swim bladder? It's a catfish. Catfish doesn't have it. So most of them have a swim bladder, not a catfish. And of course we know our sharks and those guys, they don't have a swim bladder either. They have a lateral line. We'll see that. We'll actually see that on the shark as well. The lateral line would be for sensing things, So fish swim closely together, and they don't really bump into each other that much because they know exactly where the other fish is because their lateral line is very sensitive. That lateral line will know if it is swimming in a pond. If you jump in the pond, it will know that a big thing just jumped in the pond, and it will swim away. All right? That's why when you go fishing, you don't want to jump in the pond. All right, you might walk in very, very quietly, but what you want to do is have a little something that goes in the water like that and has a little bit of motion. They say, ooh, what is that? I'm going to go toward it. Something small just came in. We call that a lure. We're going to lure the fish over. It's going to know something small just came in, like your hook, right, with a little lure on it, or a little fish, what do you call it, worm on it, or something like that. All right, they have gills on the sides typically, depending on the type of fish we're talking about. It has gills and a gill covering, a bony covering over the gills called the operculum. The operculum. Opercula would be the plural of that because they typically have it on both sides of their head, so 2 sets there. If you remember from your fish dissection back in Biology 1, you would have opened up those opercula and seen those gills, those feathery gills behind there. They are oviparous, which we're going to get the definition for all these, I think, on the bottom of your page there pretty soon. Oviparous means they lay eggs outside the body. They're fertilized outside the body. They have a 2-chambered heart. I'll show a picture of that to you here shortly. And they're cold-blooded. They're ectothermic. They are subject to whatever the temperature is around them. We have talked already about fish that are poikilothermic, right? Did we talk about the poikilothermic ones, like the big salmon and things that move their body? A tuna moves its body a lot, and it creates some warmth, some energy there. So they're still cold-blooded, but they're a special kind of cold-blooded called poikilothermic. Bless you. All right, so those are just a few things about the bony fish. And now we're going to see their body types, okay, their body types. I believe you have 8 blanks, but we only have 7 things to write down. I wish you could see those a little better. Okay, so most fish, when we say they're kind of shaped like this, right, like fish shaped, their cross section, they're pretty round. These are good eating. Those have a lot of meat on them. We call that tapered. I don't know if you can see that. So one of your blanks is going to say tapered. That's the classic fish type right there. For instance, right here we're looking at a northern bluefin tuna. We have some fish that are flat. That's another one, flat. This guy right here, from the side he looks flat. It's called a turbot or a turbo. Also, we're going to be looking at a special kind of a fish called a flounder. That's a flat fish. We have these ones called I can hardly read that. Depressed or ray shaped. Ray shaped. We have a fish that is eel-like. Eel-like. We have some, what's this name? Disc shaped. Here's the mola mola or the ocean sunfish. It's just basically a head that swims. Like a head and round. Mola mola.
That sounds Hawaiian to me.
Yeah, probably. We have box shaped, like the giant brevely. I know we have one. Let me show you several pictures of shaped fishes, and there's one called a box fish that's box shaped. Maybe it's brevaling. And then elongated, these long ones like this. This is showing you on the left, it's showing you the cross section of them.
Would elongated be like a swordfish?
Maybe that would be kind of, the carp is kind of the classic one, a carp, which are long, gar.
Yeah.
So maybe, All right, so do we have 7 different shapes of fish written down? I've got tapered, flat, depressed, eel-like, disc-shaped, box-shaped, and elongated. I only counted 7. And then, of course, you could put in your 8th box, you could put peculiar or unusual. I'm going to show you some unusual ones. Don't fit into any of these shapes. There's some crazy shaped fish out there. Sometimes we wonder, are they even fish at all? And I will guarantee they are, because they have a backbone and they have gills. Which is our 2 main things, the backbone and gills. All right, are we good there?
Yes, it's an egg.
So here's a shape of a fish.
Peculiar.
Where would you put it? I put it in peculiar. Yeah, a seahorse is a fish. Or it's got a backbone, it's got gills right up here. We're going to talk about seahorses are really cool, really fascinating creatures. We're going to talk about them. That one of their most fascinating things is their reproductive mode. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So I think these are called rockfish. So maybe they're flat. They are certainly hiding in plain sight, trying to lure creatures. Right? This one looks like a piece of coral. I guess they both do. Like a rock. What about this guy? I know, like a rhino fish or unicorn fish or something like that. So kind of tapered, but with some unusual deals right there. All right, so those are some strange looking ones, but when we get deep in the ocean, we didn't find these, y'all. We didn't find these guys for a long time until we got technology to go down deep in the ocean. It's hard to go deep in the ocean because the pressure is so intense. So here's a crazy one called the anglerfish. Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I do like about the Nemo series is they do show real fish, and it's kind of educational in that way. That is called the viper fish. We'll have a whole unit about the deep ocean, and we'll look at some of these in a little more depth. See what I did there? Yeah. All right, and this is called the goblin shark. All right, so strangely shaped. He might be a shark, not a fish. Yes.
Isn't it if they come up to too much pressure, they kind of
Yes, I'll show you one that we have an example of that here. This is some sort of weird low-depth jellyfish creature. This is like an insect kind of a thing. I think it's more like a roach with furry legs.
That's actually what it's called. It's called Yeti crab.
What's it called?
A Yeti crab.
Yeti crab. Oh, Yeti with the furry legs. This is a real close-up picture of some of the creatures down deep. Okay, so that's a electron scanning micrograph. But mentioning how.
Jabba the Hutt and the weird thing that eats Boba Fett on the sand.
Okay, so
The Sakar.
because they're under a lot of pressure, when they do come to the surface, sometimes they can become misshapen, like what Elsa was saying. And so this right here, now, so I thought that this was probably a joke, right? He's got a name. His name is the blobfish. But we're pretty sure that he looks like this because he kind of popped a little bit because of the pressure situation.
We've never seen a live blobfish, right?
They've only pulled this up dead, as far as I know. But that one, yeah, I mean, just I don't know. It looks like he's kind of. And we talked about. Remember that we watched that video about the depth and the tongue would come out of the mouth and that kind of thing. Okay, so let's talk about the flounder. So the flounder is one of those flat fish right there, and he's so unusual. Anybody ever eaten flounder? It's delicious, right? It's very, very good. Did you know that the flounder has both its eyes on one side of its head? So you picture a flounder, a fish, right, with eyes, one eye. Well, this flounder, eyes are on just one side, and it turns its whole body sideways. It's a very unusual creature. All right, but it's even more weird because it's born with its eyes, one on each side of its head. Yeah, so let's watch this little video about it.
However, as the larva develop,
I gotta start over because I had the sound off. Here we go.
like most fish, the larva of a flounder has an eye on each side of its body. However, as the larva develops into an adult, one eye actually migrates over to the other side of the body so the flounder can lay flat on its side and still see with both eyes.
All right, so strange. Here's the actual flounder.
This is underwater video of a flounder. The flounder is laying on its side, and you can see that its coloration is very much like sand. This allows it to hide on sandy bottoms. One thing you want to do is look for its eyes. They're hard to see right now, and that's by design. After all, the flounder wants to stay camouflaged. If you could see its eyes easily, that would defeat the purpose.
Yep.
Now that it's moving, you can see the eyes a little more clearly. They're raised up near the front of the body. Now remember, those eyes are on its side.
So it's just like a regular fish that just went and starts on its side now. Why does it do that? Don't know. God just thought, let's do something different today.
The haircut shirt. Kind of like.
All right, so types of fish scales. All right, apparently we were supposed to draw some of these. I did not bring any microscopes or fish scales, so sorry.
So we crossed it up?
No. You're gonna write out. I'm gonna show you really big pictures of them and have you draw them. Okay? All right. So not these. Don't draw these. So we all know that when we're catching fish, they have scales on them. Yes, typically, not the catfish. The catfish doesn't have scales. It's still a fish, but without scales. And you can see. You ever cleaned a fish? No. So I do redfish all the time. Well, I say all the time. I do redfish more frequently than other fish. And instead of scaling them, what I will do is skin them. I just take the skin completely off and not have to mess with the scales at all. But if you've ever eaten salmon, salmon has the skin on it but no scales. You ever notice that? Somebody has scraped all those scales off. Every now and then there'll be a scale in there that'll end up there. But a lot of people like to eat the skin on salmon. Any thoughts? Y'all like the skin on salmon? Yeah. I'm not crazy about it. I peel it off, yeah. I cook it with it on there. If it's really crispy from the grill, you can turn it into what they call a chip, right? A skin chip. Some people like it. I'm not crazy about it. All right, but notice how they're overlapping. Okay, to give it's like armor. It really is like a coat of armor for the creature, and they're overlapping, and they produce that kind of slimy secretion that makes them slippery, makes fish slippery. It's coming from their scales. All right, so they also do grow. As they grow, they put on a new ring. So just kind of like a tree, they add a ring to it, but it's not one per year. It's different for each fish, how many scales they put on there. So there's like how many circles they put on here. So here we beginning after 1 year, this many were added after 2 years. How they know that on this particular scale, I'm not exactly sure. There must be some sort of division. I guess I can kind of see it. Yeah. That ring there. Okay, so the 3 types of scales you're going to write down in the box real quick. You're going to skip this one called ganoid. Don't write that one. You're going to write down ctenoid, cycloid, and placoid. And I'll bring each one of these up separately. Those are just in the boxes with the words, yeah. But notice there is another type of scale called a ganoid. They're very, very hard. On the gar, when you knock on the side of a gar, it sounds like you're knocking on a door. They're very hard scales. The gar is one of those tapered or long. Do we call them tapered? Okay, so we're going to look at each one of these individually. And this is the placoid scale. It's the kind of scale that you would find on a shark. All right, so if y'all want to draw this down in one of those boxes down there, right? Yeah, the dogfish placoid scale. Just draw that in that box down there. Go ahead. Nobody's drawing.
Are we drawing what's on the screen?
Yes, you're drawing this. So pretend like you're looking under the microscope and you see this. So go ahead and draw that. Sort of a triangle shape. Oh, that is a pointer from the microscope.
Ah.
Some I've actually taken them off of my microscopes because they distract me. But yeah, that's a needle that points. I don't know what it's pointing to. But you can see that the placoid scale of a dogfish. Same thing with a shark. They have like what we call the denticles, right? Like kind of like teeth. We'll see the shark's skin today, and you'll feel that, and you'll feel the kind of roughness of them. This one doesn't tell me what the magnification is, so I of course won't ask you to write the magnification. We don't know. I'm going to guess it's about 40. It's pretty big. All right, we don't need to do a masterpiece here. Just a quick sketch of that. Next, we have our cycloid. So draw. You could even like put your fingerprint on there. Just draw a fingerprint kind of a thing. And it looks kind of like a fingerprint. Yeah, so you can see cycles, right?
Really?
And these would be put on there over time.
It worked.
All right, and the last one you have to draw is the more difficult one to draw also. You need a little more time there. All right, this one's called the ctenoid scale.
It looks like a.
So I believe this part down here on the bottom is what's attached to their skin, and out here, this kind of fanned out part right here would be what's exposed to the outside of the fish. Remember, they're overlapping like tiles on a roof. And this one's been stained, probably, that color. I think my slide that I had for fish scales, they're all on one slide. All the different scales are on one microscopic slide. So maybe if we have a time when we have little lab to do, I'll bring those for y'all. Okay, we good? All right, let's turn to 6B. Swimming over to 6B.
I heard 16.
16? Turn to 16.
16? I was
Look at
like,
both ahead. 6B. All right, we're going to talk about color in fishes. I believe your first blank that doesn't have anything filled in says something about characteristics about the ichthyes, right?
bony fish.
Yeah, which we basically talked about already. Wrote on the other page. If you have a few other things you want to write down, but isn't the next blank down coloration?
No,
Yes.
Yeah, coloration.
Wait, Chewy said no.
I'm kidding.
Oh. Come on.
Coloration,
man.
locomotion, and feeding.
Okay, yeah. So there's a lot of stuff on. So if you want to use some of those blanks under characteristics to write some things down, you can. Okay, there's a great diversity of color in fishes. Notice I'm using that fishes because I'm talking about all the fishes of the world. And this includes freshwater and saltwater. As we all know that the freshwater fish aren't as colorful as the saltwater fish. Some use their color for camouflage. Others are brightly colored to attract a mate. Color is also used for disguise, advertisement. That's attracting a mate. Advertisement. Look at me. I'm beautiful. That kind of thing. And then mimicry. They act like something else.
Which one do we write this on?
Coloration.
Oh.
Coloration in fishes. We have special cells, which we've talked about when we looked at the squid. Remember the squid? We talked about those chromatophores. Those are cells containing pigments that expand and contract, producing color change. So we watched a video about how the squid did that, right? And the octopus does that. Well, fish can do it too. Not all of them. Some chromatophores have crystals that reflect the light like little mirrors. You probably noticed that about some fish are kind of shiny. You know, they're kind of reflective. So those are those chromatophores in there that are doing that. All right, as you can see some of the names over here, right? So our lutein, zeaxanthin, carotene. Carotene we know from carrots, right? It's an orangey color. Cantazanthin, astaxanthin. I know astaxanthin's like a supplement you're supposed to take. It's supposed to be healthy for you. Yeah, carotene right here. What does that say in the middle? Does it say carotenoids? These are all the different kinds of carotenoids, I guess. Yeah. So we see those kind of colors in the fish. All right, so that's just some general information about color. Basically, there's lots of different colors. Some fish can change their colors. Some are shiny. Let's watch a little video on it.
Coloration in fishes is often produced by specialized cells called chromatophores. This coloration usually has a purpose. For example, this fish is colored very similar to its surroundings. This provides camouflage that hides it from predators. Other fishes use their coloration for disguise. This butterfly fish, for example, has a big spot on its posterior. The spot looks like an eye. It can cause predators to bite the tail rather than the head, giving the fish a chance to escape. It can also confuse predators, making them think that the butterfly fish is much bigger. Coloration can also be used as advertisement. The bright colors and patterns on this fish advertise the fact that it has venomous spines and that other fish ought to stay away.
Yeah, and if you're ever swimming with one of those, don't touch those. They're really poisonous, really venomous.
Is that a zebrafish?
That is a lionfish.
Oh, wait.
Okay, look at that color. So first of all, we have the bright colors, and then we have those kind of stripes going on there. You see how those stripes might help them hide a little bit if the sun kind of dappling through? Sort of like the stripes of a tiger, right? These are other fish that are coming along for like a ride there. Look at how beautiful that one is. These, by the way, these two are saltwater fish that have all those great colors. Notice he's swimming in front of an anemone. Not sure if he's fixing to get caught or what. That's a beautiful fish there. Look at that guy. It's a parrotfish. Now these have all been that kind of classic fish shape, right? I believe this is that one called the box fish. This is a boxy shaped fish. And notice its color too, right there. Here's that beautiful but very, very bad lionfish, yeah. So they have spines that they'll poke into you and you'll die. And they're very destructive to reefs and stuff. They actually pay people to go out and spear them and put them in a tube and kill them. Yeah, they're pests. But they're beautiful. Lots of great color. Okay, speaking of color, do you have a blank for counter shading? Yeah, so counter shading is important. We mentioned this last time, is that the dorsal side is darker. Okay, listen. The underside is, the ventral side is lighter. That's why if there's a fish underneath swimming, it'll be looking up at it and it'll get lost in the sunshine. If there's a fish over the top of it, it'll get lost in the darkness of the ocean. All right, so we call that counter shading, and that is there to benefit them from being captured by predators. Here's a picture of one you can see right on it. So definitely counter shading up there. So maybe kind of a greenish color if it lives in sort of a place like the Texas coast or something that's got more green type water. All right, the anatomy. Okay, we're looking at the typical anatomy of a fish right here. So I'm hoping you have a little bit of memory from Biology 1. Or if you've been to a fish restaurant where they serve the whole fish like this. Sometimes they'll bring, oh, you know what? Casa Chapala brings out a whole fish. And you just have to cut away the fins and stuff and eat it. My husband had it one time and he liked it, and I'm thinking, I don't want to make eye contact with my dinner. So, I don't like that. Yeah. So, but you can see here a couple of things. We know their eye and the mouth, their gill, the cover of the gill is called the operculum. We have the dorsal fins. Typically, the front dorsal fin is spiny. You may know that if you've ever been fishing. And if it lays down, but if you pull it up, that's pretty sharp spikes in there. We have the caudal fin right here, which is also known as a tail. Notice the very end before the fin begins is called the peduncle. We've seen that word before. We can see our anal fin and our pelvic fins right down here. And then you can see on this one that line going through. That's the lateral line. Remember, that's that nervous, it detects electricity, it detects movement in the nearby water. All right. In locomotion, we know they use their muscles. Have you ever noticed when you eat salmon how it kind of falls apart in little pieces? The pieces come apart in little, I don't know, sections? That's because of the shape of their muscles. They're called myomeres. The myomeres have connective tissue in between the muscular tissue that give it that shape, and that shape gives them a lot of power when they move that muscle. It allows them to move very quickly. This, I think we're looking at a salmon right here. Fish move with their tail going sideways like this, okay? Different than dolphins that move their tail up and down like this, all right? So when they move sideways, they're moving those muscles. You can see those myomeres right here. That is a cross-section of a piece of salmon. You can buy the salmon from the store that looks just like that, right? That cross-section of it. This is where the backbone would have been. That's the actual backbone. And those are the myomeres. Here you can see them there. Those little septae separating out that muscle. All right, swim bladder. Fish will actually use the air that they take in through their gills to squeeze oxygen into that swim bladder. More oxygen gets in there, they start to float, and they can squeeze their swim bladder down so that they can sink. So they have some control about what depth they have in the water right there. If you look at it from the cross section right here, you can see it takes up quite a bit of space in this fish right here. When I usually dissect the redfish, the swim bladder is pretty large. Of course, when you cut into it, as soon as you cut, you're going to poke into and pop that swim bladder. Okay, digestion. First of all, here's our gills. So the gills are for respiration, right? Gills are for breathing. The water goes across the gills. The blood supply in the gill takes in the O2 that's dissolved in the water, not in the H2O. And then it also has this bony part right here that are called gill rakers. Okay, so as it comes through here, small things, small animals, zooplankton, things like that, can actually be caught in there, and it helps to keep their gills clear of that, like they don't want to choke on it, if you will. But it also, they can use those gill rakers to get some food, and then they're going to take most of the food they're going to take in through their mouth, and so we can see some fish actually, so their digestive system, you can see here, mouth, and then the stomach, and then the gut, right here. So our esophagus and our stomach is that big part right there in a long gut. And sometimes we'll see what is known as a spiral valve in there, and we'll see that when we dissect our shark today. All right. Some fish have teeth.
Need some braces.
I know. They're not great teeth. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is a piranha. Have you heard of a piranha?
Aren't your teeth supposed to be sharp?
Well, they aren't pretty sharp, but what they do is they'll nibble away at whatever they're eating really fast, including if you jump in the water with them. Okay. I read a story last week, I think, and it was one of those ones that there were 4 headlines, and one of them was fake, and I had to guess which one was fake. Well, one of them was about a guy who was swimming to get away from being attacked by a shark, and he jumped into a pond and was eaten by piranha. And I said, well, obviously that's the fake one. It wasn't the fake one. So apparently this happened to this poor guy. I don't know where he was swimming. I don't want to go there. It was not America.
Was it one piranha or like a bunch?
Like a whole school of piranha. And then there's none. Have you ever seen the cartoons where the thing goes in and they pull it out, it's just the bones left? Yeah, it's kind of how they work. Yeah. Here's another set of teeth. Oh, look at those. Yeah. Once again, yeah. We need to do. All right. Their circulatory system. Remember, how many chambers do they have in their heart? 2. Thank you. You can see right here their gills would be up here. Okay. They're going to take in oxygen here. Here's the heart, the 2 chambers, the ventricle and the atrium. Okay. Then it has a large aorta right here and a large vein right here. So it goes through. It gets oxygenated. It takes the oxygenated blood to the body. The body uses it. It comes back to the heart to pump it back. So we call that a closed circulatory system, pumping between the heart and the gills, similar to the way our heart and lungs, right? So it oxygenates the blood, and then allows the muscles back here to use that. These very, very small vessels right here are called capillaries, and then we have arteries and veins that distribute that. All right. So respiratory, we can see the water flows through the mouth. We talked about that last time and how the shark always has to keep swimming, right? These guys can open their mouth and pump the water through past the gills right there. Notice we have 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 gill rows right there, and they're able to pick up the oxygen from the water. And then they have the gill rakers on there too to keep the stuff from getting caught in the gills right here. So they're sometimes folded so we can see a lot of surface area. They're very feathery, a lot of surface area, allowing it to touch the water, to touch the oxygen, to pull it in with a lot of efficiency. All right, the two-chambered heart, we have our ventricle and our atrium. All right, and then our ventricle pumps out to what is basically the aorta to the gills, and then it comes around the body, and then the vein brings it back to the heart into the atrium. In our heart would be the top chamber and the bottom chamber. They're about equal there, but the ventricle has more muscle in it because it's going to pump it up to the gills. So we can see that here, pumping it to the gills and then around to the body. Around to the body like that. All right, the nervous system. There is a brain, and fish do have brains. It's just they're not very large brains. Okay. I believe in our shark dissection we're fixing to do, you're supposed to try to get to the brain. We'll see. The shark doesn't have any bones, so maybe we can get into his head. That'll be our last thing to do right there. But you can see right here the brain is a very small. Whenever you're trying to get the brain out of a bony fish, it's very difficult to do because they have a very, very thick skull. But if we get to it, it looks something like this. So what do y'all know about the brain? So like for instance, we have the biggest part of our brain is called the cerebrum. Do you see it here? Okay. Our cerebrum is very convoluted, very wrinkled, right? And that's because that's the part of the brain that does the thinking. All right, and in humans, we have the most developed brain because we do a lot of thinking. We're the only creature, as far as we know, who can think about thinking. We can ponder, we can wonder, we can do philosophy, which gives me a headache, but you know what I'm saying? Where, sharks aren't going, I wonder why, how far is up? They're not thinking these things, They're thinking, where's my next meal coming from? They're not reading books, right? None of them are reading. And as far as I know, there's no other animal in the world that can read. Some can do sign language. That's it, after you train them. All right, so the cerebrum is smooth. If somebody tells you you have a smooth cerebrum, they're calling you not smart. Okay, our cerebrum needs to be nice and convoluted. Notice what's very large. What's this yellow part?
Yeah, the optic lobe.
Oh, the optic lobe. What does that tell you about fish? They depend a lot on their vision. Right. Olfactory lobe, and what's that for? Smelling. Yeah, it goes straight to the cerebrum right here, so they're going to be able to smell depending on the creature. Some animals have greater ability to smell than others. The cerebellum is for balance, so the fish keep pretty balanced. And then we have what is known as the brain stem, including the medulla oblongata right here. Okay, and pituitary gland is part of the endocrine system, the hormones for the creature. All right, take a look at these guys here. I like this picture because you can see the lateral line very clearly right here. And that lateral line is part of that nervous system. Their brain is connected to that, where they're going to be able to know if something big just jumped in the water, something small just jumped in the water. And also when they're swimming next to each other and they move really quickly, they don't really bump into each other because they have that really good sense of where everybody is. So what we have then is we have this nerve that comes through this dark blue picture right down here. And then there's this canal, and that canal, see how water can come into it? And that water can move and have vibrations that come into it. And up here you can see these little sensory hairs right here will be moved by that and give us an idea, just like our sensory hairs. Most of our senses involve hairs being moved, including our ear. If we move our head, we know that we're bending over and we don't fall down because our body compensates for us leaning over, because we have little rocks that tumble past this little cupula right here, and these sensory hairs know that we're doing that, okay? There's fluid in there. These have water. Ours has just a fluid in our ears. If you spin around, of course, it makes you dizzy because the fluid keeps spinning, right? Now, on sharks, we have a very specialized version here. You can see right here they have these little pits you can see in their nose. right here with something called the ampullae of Lorenzini. I mentioned it last time, but since we're looking at the shark today in our dissection, we'll be paying a little more attention to that. Fish have it too, but sharks have it much more amplified. And so we're going to see why it's called that and everything. So we can see that these little canals right here are similar to what I showed you on the lateral line because they're attached to these nerve fibers down here. We're going to see some movement take place. It's actually electrical impulses that are being picked up there. All right, let's watch a little thing about it.
We live in a world full of electric fields. Animals, plants, even the earth itself creates them, but only a handful of creatures can actually sense them. Sharks, also rays and skates, a whole group, animals called elasmobranchs, can actually detect electricity. Maybe it's like feeling the presence of someone hiding in a dark room. A different way of experiencing their world, an extra sense that we don't have. And for sharks and rays, an extra edge for finding their prey. The discovery of this exceptional sense dates back 300 years, long before the discovery of electricity, to a man named Stefano Lorenzini. Lorenzini was a doctor with a passion for anatomy who one day found himself dissecting a ray, which is where he noticed the strangest thing: tiny pores that dotted the ray's skin. He drew a picture. It shows how each pore led to a tube full of goo, and each tube ended in a little pouch. Those little round pouches reminded him of ancient Roman flasks called ampullae, so that's what he called them. But when it came to the function of those ampullae, Lorenzini was stumped. 3 centuries later, we're still figuring out exactly how electroreception works. And a big part of that is studying what makes these electric fields in the first place. Every time this fish opens its mouth to breathe, it exposes its mucous membranes to the salty water, creating a tiny voltage that disappears every time the mouth closes. At Florida Atlantic University, scientists are actually able to measure this phenomenon. That repeating on-off pattern is an electric frequency carried easily through salt water. 2 hertz, 2 breaths a second. Stingrays like these can tune into that same frequency, like a radio channel. Take a close look at a stingray and you can see those pores. They lead to long canals that cluster together. When an electric charge enters a pore, it travels through the highly conductive gel in the canal to the ampulla, where special cells detect the current and send a message along nerves to the brain. That's how stingrays can spot prey hidden beneath them, even though their eyes are on top of their heads. But the ampullae aren't just for hunting. Pores on the ray's back also let it know if someone's trying to sneak up on it from behind. Here, the researchers placed diodes on the floor of a tank, replicating the same electric frequency as a breathing fish. They flip the current from circle to circle, and the ray strikes the active target. Maybe by studying how this sense works, we can learn better ways to coexist with these ancient creatures. Find new ways to keep them out of our nets and away from our surfers. Of course, none of this really explains what it's like to feel electricity. Is it as simple as flipping a switch on and off? Or as varied and subtle as smell or taste? A whole spectrum of experiences hidden from the rest of us.
All right, so the idea of figuring out a way, like if a surfer had on his surfboard some sort of transmitter that allowed the shark to know this is not a seal, and maybe we wouldn't have as many attacks for surfers. All right, social behavior, you have a blank for that. Social behavior. Many fish are social. In other words, they hang around in a group. What's a group of fish called? A school of fish. And they hang around together. Mostly there's strength in numbers, right? So if there's a predator nearby, as long as you're not the slowest fish in the school, then maybe somebody else will get caught that day, right? And they swim kind of in unison together, move around together, try to cause maybe some confusion for any kind of predators that may be out there. Okay, so part of their social behavior is living in groups. Not all creatures do that. Sharks, for instance, do not live in groups. They are solitary, right? So migrations are part of their social behavior as well. So we have some creatures who make massive migrations. There are a couple of really famous ones. The famous ones would be the whales, which are not fish. They are mammals, but they make great migrations. And then, of course, the famous fish that does it would be the salmon. Okay, so salmon make migrations. So here we can see going from, up to the cooler parts. So a lot of times we're looking at whales that are doing that kind of thing. But sometimes when those whales make that migration, other creatures will follow that migration to catch little tidbits that might be left behind from whales eating and that kind of thing. But the salmon, we know, go back to where they were born, right? And they go upstream, so they swim upstream. And here's one jumping up a river right there. And this is, of course, a really good time to catch the salmon because they're kind of in a vulnerable spot. They're trying to swim against the current, and we can catch them a little easier that way.
Don't koi also swim against currents?
I don't know about koi.
Okay.
Yeah, I only think of koi as being a domesticated animal.
Okay.
So not in the wild. So I don't know. Yeah, it's possible. Okay, reproduction. We'll be looking at the life cycle here. We're going to talk about that oviparous thing. Well, I'll give you those words here in just a second. So what we have is eggs are laid outside of the female body. Then they become fertilized by the male who comes by. And then they move to, here we're looking at the salmon, yeah. So we have, this is called an eleven. I don't know how you pronounce it exactly, but it's very, very small. It's still got some of its yolk sac on it right there. And it turns into what we call a fry somewhere up here when they get a little larger. Okay, so they're getting bigger and bigger and they're maturing. When they're mature, of course, they're going to return to their place where they were born to spawn. This is even if they live in the ocean and they were born in fresh water. Okay, they will swim all the way back there to the fresh water. Only some fish can do that. So most fish are going to be strictly saltwater or strictly freshwater. But not the salmon. They are, they can, and we'll get to that in a future module. All right, but essentially what I want you to know is that they lay eggs. Those eggs hatch out. And so these are the terms you need to know. Oviparous means to produce eggs that hatch outside of the body. The female lays the eggs, they get fertilized outside of the body, and then they hatch outside of the body. So these are never cared for by their mama. Okay, they hatch out and they're already living the life they need to live. Ovoviviparous is eggs that are fertilized and hatch inside the female body. And it looks like they have live birth, but it's not really live birth because they survive on their own. So just like inside the little eggs like we saw in that little 11 guy, they have a little yolk sac of their own inside the body of the mother. Okay? Viviparous means internal fertilization and live birth. We'll be seeing that only with the mammals. They're being nourished by a placenta and then nursing afterwards. So things like the dolphin and the whales and things like that. Marine mammals. All right, but these are terms you're going to need to know for the rest of the year. So make sure you have a good definition of these written down. They'll probably be on a quiz. So we have a quiz next week, yeah? We have a quiz on Module 6 next week. Then we have kind of a long lecture and then a short lab. All right. So this is, we're back to talking about reproduction here. We're looking at the seahorse, which is, its genus name is Hippocampus. It's interesting, there's a little structure inside of our brain called the hippocampus because it's shaped like a seahorse. That's why it's called the hippocampus. Because that's its name. Notice it's in italics right there. All right, so what about these guys? We'll see right here. So the female lays the eggs. The male fertilizes the eggs, but then the male carries the eggs. So we thought for a while that the male were giving birth to these little guys, but no, he's just carrying fertilized eggs. The eggs comes from the female, okay? And the males have a little pouch right here, and they'll hold those eggs in that pouch while they develop. Okay, so you can see some pregnant male fish right here, but they're not really, I mean, I guess they are. They're holding them in a pouch, all right? And so why they do this, why seahorses have the male brood the eggs, I'm not sure. Once again, creative God, right? They're already creative looking creatures. Here you can see some of the babies coming out, right? They just have developed in the pouch and now they're starting to hatch out, if you will. For a while, of course, you could see why we might have mistaken that as live birth at one point. But it's not. That would be ovoviviparous. I wanted to show you this guy. This is called a sea dragon. It's a type of one of these kind of fish, right? So look how cool it looks. Once again, the males carry the eggs in the pouch too. And this one you can actually see. This one's called the pipefish, I think it's called. And notice how it's carrying the eggs. So this is the male carrying the eggs right there down. It doesn't look as much like a pouch unless it's a see-through pouch. So in some places in the world, these are considered a delicacy. So seahorse on a stick, right? Crunch, they're kind of salted and dried, and you can buy them. And I think we also have some scorpions too, yeah? So here's our seahorse, and I think some of these are scorpions. And people, this is in a market, and you walk by and pick up the stick and go pay for it, and then you walk around and eat it like, popsicle or something. All right, we're going to get to our shark now because we're going to do our dissection on our shark. So this is the anatomy of the shark. In your book, you're going to see lots and lots of words. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's questions. I think it's telling you to underline things with certain colors or something like that.
It says check as you locate each feature, check the terms in bold with, just check them off. As you
Okay,
find
I
them.
don't need you to use different colors to do that. You can just check them like that. We just have one shark, right, that we're gonna look at, and then and I'll go ahead and cut him open for y'all, and then y'all are gonna come up and try to find all these features on him, okay? But essentially, this is the shape of him. We'll be looking for that dorsal fin. Okay, it is a female, and we will see all this. And there's no place to draw anything, though, is there?
No. There is.
Well, no, there is.
It's on page 53. It's at the very end.
Oh, that box at the bottom. What does it ask you to draw? Internal or external?
It just says image or scale.
Oh, okay, not too bad.
So I mean, we can draw.
This is the internal anatomy. We're going to see a couple of things. We're going to have some memory from last week. Remember how the head on top and the mouth is on the underside, on the ventral side. We're going to see a really, really large, does this say intestine? We're going to see a really large liver. Is it not in there? Oh, it doesn't show. The liver is much larger than that picture shows right there. Mostly we're going to be taking a look at the liver. We're going to see the reproductive organs of this female. We are going to see this, what's called the spiral vent in the gut. That I believe it asks you about that. So carnivorous fishes, short, straight intestines, and herbivorous fishes have coiled intestines. The spiral valve in the shark. We're going to see this in our dissection. Okay, we got to find that for sure. All right, so we're going to get started on that. I can leave this up. If you want this one up or this one up? That one?
That's a good one.
All right, and let me get everything out.